Indie food is the new indie rock. The thrill of discovery and sense of ownership experienced by finding a new band now applies to finding a new small batch bourbon, pop-up restaurant, or food truck. And we're loyally evangelizing small batch food and drink brands the way we once did for indie bands and labels. As a result, a bumper crop of blogs, radio shows, and events fashioned after music industry models have been launched around this food and drink revolution, many helmed by music industry vets. So let me introduce you to some great guys here. Nils Bernstein, on the end, does publicity for Matador Records, where he's worked for 17 years. Before that, he worked at Sub Pop, owned a record store, wrote about music, and catered on the side. He also writes about food and drink for magazines like Bon Appetit, Wine Enthusiast, and Men's Journal, particularly related to Mexico, where he spends much of his time. Rick and Michael Mast are the co-founders, owners, and master chocolate makers of Mast Brothers Chocolates, the pioneering bean-to-bar craft chocolate maker founded in Brooklyn in 2007. Inspired by their love of food, family, and craft, the Mast Brothers began selling chocolate at local markets and specialty food shops, quickly becoming known for their exceptionally high standards about sourcing ingredients and a unique handcrafted approach. Their chocolate is now available in over 500 locations worldwide, and they just released their first cookbook in October. And Tom Monday here has spent his entire career working at the intersection of independent music, media, and technology, connecting bands, brands, and fans while working for the likes of No Depression, LimeWire, and Billboard Magazine. Realizing the increased commingling of the music and food cultures and excited by all the similarities, he decided to take what he knows about marketing music products and apply it to the independent, artisanal food and drink products with his current ventures, Small Batch America and Indie Canteen. And I'm Josh Whitman. I've worked for labels, distributors, and artists for the last 20 plus years. I have a couple of independent restaurants in North Carolina, as well as a music club that also serves food. So let's get started. Obviously, a lot of music types seem to have gotten involved in the food culture. I don't know if that's because most people ended up working in a restaurant at one time or other before they got their career started. But maybe, Tom, you can start with how you kind of got interested in food and what inspired you to make it your business.
Yeah, so basically I just needed to return to doing something meaningful to me. I had worked for something called No Depression. I don't know if you guys know what that was, but it's sort of an alt-country magazine and kind of community. And so we work with a lot of independent artists, musicians, and really kind of help them grow their careers. Like what we did with that magazine was really useful and meaningful to those folks. And then I sort of got away from that, and I spent a soul-crushing period at Billboard. Sorry if they're a sponsor, but you know that sort of made me realize I needed to return doing something that mattered and was meaningful, and I missed the community, the community aspect of independent music that wasn't really there for me anymore. And I was seeing that it did exist in independent food and drink. So that's why I'm in food now. Yeah.
Michael or Rick?
Well, we started Mast Brothers Chocolate more out of a love of food than out of anything specifically chocolate. And in fact, actually, my background even started in music. I studied classical music, but before that, there's definitely something brainwavy that's similar, I guess. But we started in our apartment. We were really curious about all things food, so we were part of that kind of Brooklyn food nerd community that was interested in homebrewing beer, pickling stuff, curing things, and we kind of thought about chocolate like we used to throw these Wednesday dinner parties that were pretty hedonistic, and we would challenge each other about different food things, and we started talking about chocolate, and it was so strange that here you have the most popular food on earth and nobody knows how it's made, and that just seemed like an opening for a challenge. It was like challenge accepted. So we got really excited about kind of getting our hands dirty and figuring out how to make chocolate. And that was many years before. We were kind of like messing around with chocolate making for many years before we decided to make it a business. But we really were kind of home brewing chocolate in our apartment for a while before we went pro.
Nils, how about you? Was it the expense account back in the early 90s?
That was part of it.
Yeah.
at Matador, when we sign a band, we kind of, a lot of it has to do with what they're interested in, food-wise, where they like to eat, how deeply involved they are in it. But I don't have a great answer for it. I've always been into food. I've always cooked. I've been into learning about food. I grew up in the 70s when it was a really good time for young and kind of a radical approach and a new approach to food and kind of eating local and ethnic cuisines and stuff. And that was kind of there was a lot of interesting stuff happening around food in the 70s in Seattle, and it just kind of was always woven into my life. So I always worked in music, but I always kept kind of tied to food. And as I've been working in music now for over 30 years, food just, it kind of has a more interesting role now, just because, you're usually more interested in the things that you're not immediately involved in. So, I used to write about music years ago, and I just started writing about food and drinks. That's kind of where a lot of the same way that I'd be really, really excited about new bands when I was younger, wanted to share that information that's happening now with food and products and places and stuff that, that I just want to share that info in the same way.
Cool. Well, so as we talk about the parallels or the differences between indie food and indie music, I mean, how is the making and distributing and marketing of an indie food or drink product similar to developing an indie band or an artist? And then what are the best practices for both? I mean, I'm assuming building the awareness and having to create the groundswell is probably step number one, but are there other things that are similar?
For us, for chocolate, it really first starts with just focusing on our craft and just making the best, most delicious chocolate we can, and that's really what drives everything. Once we have that, it is about how do we get people to actually taste it. Otherwise, it's just something that we have for our friends and family to share, but that's not really something that's going to build a business model. So, it's about there's similarities in just having that grassroots, kind of growing that grassroots campaign. And for us, that means taking it to farmers markets, artist markets, putting yourself out there, just getting people to taste the chocolate. And, just like with music,
it's the same thing.
You gotta have people that hear the music.
You've got to write the best songs possible, and then that will rise.
And if you're fiercely independent, then that means you're probably budgetarily constrained. So that means that a lot of what you're doing is just you have to be a complete entrepreneur yourself. You have to do everything. You have to carry the chocolate or carry your instruments to the shows. You've got to book your own shows. You have to book your own gigs. Think of every little aspect about pricing, about what your website's going to look like. Everything is your responsibility. And
you've got to be your own roadie when you're going to the farmers markets.
It is kind of a carny culture.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
I would say that if you're making a product, be it music or a food or drink product, you need an audience for it. And I say audience. Obviously, for music, you need an audience, but for small batch food and drink, it really is an audience. It's not just a buyer-seller, not just a customer. You actually need a relationship, with those people, because those folks really want to be fans of you. They want to know your story. They want to they want to kind of feel like they know you and know what how you make what you make. So it's similar that way as well.
I want to make the point that I think independence in food is more important than independence in music. I think it comes with a lot of environmental, social, political, et cetera, issues when you're talking about food conglomerates versus independence in food. It's a really important difference. It's more important. I think there's an important difference between independent and major labels, but it's not as crucial, it's not as dire. I mean, what the difference between you guys and Hershey's, I'm sure there's a lot of great people at Hershey's doing nice things, but that's a really, really, really important distinction for not just what you do, but for chocolate. That's an important product of society, So there's I don't know, to me it's a really, really important decision. Whereas a band could go from an indie label to a major label and remain pretty much the same. It's really hard for a food product to do that.
But do you think that maybe like as time progresses that food is destined to follow that same path, that what started as a sort of anti-establishment thing will eventually become, much more complex?
Which gets into the co-opting element. You know, I think like the big food companies are trying to take advantage of what's going on in indie food. And similarly, there's a lot of independent food companies that are selling out, for lack of a better word, and doing things that maybe aren't true to their original vision. So it's kind of happening in both directions for sure, which is exactly what happened in music.
Yeah.
It takes serious commitment on behalf of like a food or drink, an independent food or drink maker, to stay independent, to source responsibly and, to grow responsibly,
Well, there's probably a lot of pitfalls with that. I mean, once you kind of reach a certain juncture, you kind of have to decide, like, can we consistently make this product at a larger level for, let's say you get a big order at medium chain, you've got to make that decision if that's the right move. Similar, I think, to bands and their aesthetic. Is it the right move at that right time, or should they wait for album number 3? Or, it seems like with the advent of how the music industry is going with streaming services, that music is just gorge on it, have as much as you want. It's great because it is kind of turning kids back into music fans that may have been interested in video games for a while and kind of come back to music because of the ease of access. But a lot of people like us, we're the ones that used to go to record stores and want to dig in the bins and want to be exposed to things by going to that record store. And that seems to me to be a very similar experience to the new food culture, where you're having to go to the farmer's market. You got to get there early, or you're going to miss the best stuff, and you really need to seek out, and that's part of the fun.
For sure. I mean, I used to work for about 2 years at a place called Fingerprints Records in Long Beach. Anybody know that place?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Ran Foster.
So that's definitely a part of my blood, that idea of discovery. I was in charge of the tiny classical music section, but still, nonetheless, I was excited when something cool came in. So that idea of kind of search and discovery is definitely really exciting. It just popped in my head. Another thing that's really interesting is that to compare between food and music is that independent food and music is that as you grow, I think the one thing that you have to start thinking about is that if you become successful, if your audience grows and people demand your attention and want to taste or listen to your product all around the world, how do you distribute? And I think that distribution channels are a really important thing to figure out. That's something that we struggle with a lot, and we've kind of defined ourselves as continuing to be independent by self-distributing still. Like, we don't go through any large distribution company, and we've actually been one of the first food producers to even make Whole Foods break their rules so that they would actually allow us to just work directly with the stores, which we were really impressed with. So distribution channels are something that we've got a lot of exciting things that we want to do in the future that we think we can beat that sort of centralized distribution idea, but I'm sure that musicians face that also.
But it's less so with music now, with streaming, like you were saying, the ease of access for tiny bands, which is an important difference that, with indie food, you're still dealing with, you're having to seek it out. There's a certain price level that's not accessible for everybody, whereas now music is, it's pretty democratic.
That's true,
but
we'll start streaming virtual chocolate.
Yeah, please.
It would be a lot easier to make,
Please
actually.
do that.
You can download chocolate, right? Get a 3D printer, just add the ingredients to the top.
Yeah. But it's hard, when you talk about the impact that you want it to have, it does need to be able to kind of pervade the culture in the way that music does, and in an affordable way. So who's, it's like you have to figure out who benefits. How do you, you take this excitement and interest and all the important stuff happening in food and really break it out on a vast level. Like anything to happen in the U.S. has to happen on a vast level. And how do you, like you're saying, you try to retain the quality while getting it to as many people as possible.
And as you get older and you have kids and they need to go to school and they need to go to, assuming they might want to go to college, and just those kind of pressures, there are realistic financial pressures. So how does, that's what we're just at the verge of starting to figure out how are we going to do this? I mean, we have we sell what we make. You know, it's not like we've got a giant warehouse of inventory and a huge sales staff that's going around trying to get it. We always know how much we're going to make monetarily by how much we can produce. So eventually, so how can we grow beyond that? We've got some. I think that there's some really interesting ideas about the decentralization of. I don't know if we want to get into that, but it's sort of like what a lot of the tech industries, and probably, I guess it's similar to streaming music, but if you can decentralize food production so that it can maintain its craftness, its quality-driven scale, that's something we're really interested in. So just recently, we just opened a second factory in Brooklyn. As opposed to just building one large factory, we basically built a secondary, smaller factory that increased production, and we now just have built a larger team of just amazing chocolate makers. So even that mentality, we didn't just get a bunch of bigger equipment. We didn't just shut everything down, clear it out, get bigger equipment, and start printing money. We decided to make a conscientious decision to just basically replicate, but even on a smaller, better level, because we've learned so much in the past 7 years. And trained even better. Now there's just going to be, 50 amazing chocolate makers running around Brooklyn. So.
And it's a way for us to maintain that kind of grassroots mentality too, so that we can open up our factory and what we're doing to the local community around us, and then all of a sudden you're building it, within the neighborhoods, and it's really worked well for us so far.
Can I ask a question about distribution?
Yeah.
With No Depression, we had some direct relationships with outlets, and some we sent to distributors, and we hated the distributors because we never really knew where the stuff was going, and how it sold, and so we got returns back, and so. Is it the same in your business? Is that
it is?
What are the main reasons you want to stay independently distributed?
It is the same in that, all we have heard from working in the food industry with distributors and large distributors are pretty horrible stories. So we always knew we wanted to have that direct relationship to not only the farmers and make everything from scratch on site in our own factories, but we wanted that same mentality to transfer to our customers and work directly with the stores and the specialty shops that we work with. So, it's been successful in that way. So we really have these strong relationships with all these accounts, and don't have to rely on this third party or salespeople, taking extra trips to see what's actually going on. And
you can never afford to be just another chocolate bar on that huge rack that every specialty shop has now.
Right.
So the difference maker is, and which you will be, even if you have beautiful packaging. And so if we're not able to connect the people that are on the floor selling every day, if they haven't come to our factory and hung out with us or had a beer with Derek Herbster over here or something like that, then it's just another chocolate bar. So we're really, that direct relationship is hugely important, and it's just like having it's literally just having that third party get in the way if you have a distribution. It's just getting in the way of something that should be so pure and simple and fun.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Every label makes their bands go out, do the in-store. Got to do the in-store. Got to be there, play for nobody. Is this? We mentioned Whole Foods. Having a direct relationship with those guys. Are you in? Are you having to sample? What are the ways that you get your product in front of people that obviously aren't the internet or?
Yeah, we definitely do in stores for sure. We'd even be like, we would think of it as a privilege to do more of them. The more people, we love talking to people about what we do. It's so unique and so interesting, and we're passionate about it. So I don't care if it's 10 people in a tiny little market in Bay Ridge, you know what I mean? It's exciting to talk to people about what we do. Yeah.
You're also you are the label and the band.
Yeah.
And the distributor, yeah.
Right.
I never thought about it like that. That's nice.
So, but it's hard when you have, I don't know, it seems to me to be an important difference. Like if a label went out to promote the label, there's a lot that they would do and be thrilled about doing and try to make it interesting. And it's harder when you're trying to connect you're trying to connect the label with the band, with the distributor, with the store, with the fans, and it's all.
It certainly gives us more control. And I think that's worked to our advantage, whereas for some other people, it might not be the case.
And you also have one record. I mean, in a sense, you know.
But they're all hits.
Of course, yeah. Yes. I only need one.
Hey, Tom, are you? I know you've been working on something that's kind of a touring showcase of maker products. So,
yeah. So, the one thing that sort of hasn't changed in the music industry, and it's really, you know, the industry has changed so much, obviously, but bands still have to tour. You know, they still have to go out and gather fans, you know, get in a van and go play a show and, you know, do some press, get back in the van and do it all over again. And I want to do that with indie food makers. So I'm talking to a large chain who's based in Austin about sponsoring it. You guys can figure that one out. But yeah, so basically putting some makers in a van and you know, going town to town, doing a little press, doing in stores, and gathering some fans along the way. And we're calling it Band of Makers. So maybe we'll piggyback with a tour, you know, or you know, something like that.
well, it seems like, you know, there are existing kind of food shows, I guess, and now the coordination between food and music seems to be happening more. I mean, you're doing some stuff with Billy Reed this week. You did a promotion with ATO Records recently on a new release they had. Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of coordination of food and music together and how that can be seen?
Actually, can I go back to the
Sure.
the tour thing?
Yeah.
You know, in the same way a musician or a band, you know, they start playing out in their hometown and they play those venues, and if they want to grow, they actually have to, like, you know, sort of go to the neighboring towns, you know, and build those relationships. And I think the parallel with indie food, you know, or producers is that they outgrow their farmers market, right? At some point, you can go every weekend and set up your table, but you're sort of preaching to the choir in some ways. And so that was sort of the impetus for doing this food tour, is like helping people graduate, you know, and being that sort of middle thing between, you know, the Flea or Smorgasburg and, you know, the Whole Foods or whoever, right? But what was it? What am I doing?
Oh, I just, you know, just kind of bringing it back to the music-food relationship and kind of talking about, well, the events that you're doing right now at South by. I mean, you know, there's a ton of food sponsors. There's a big Doritos tent. I mean, we're not talking that level, but what you're doing with Billy Reed, for example, or you just recently did with ATO and their new release, I thought that was cool and almost, you know, kind of the new thing here that we could get together.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's tons of like food brands doing things at South by, but, you know, they're giant, and do they really mean anything, right? They're just
a lot of sampling,
a lot of noise. But at South by, I just came from the second day of doing these. I did the hospitality for the VIPs and the bands at the Billy Reed parties at Weather Up. And what we did, we humbly are calling them the world's best PB&Js, and all the components are indie small batch products. So we have like nut butters from North Carolina, jams from like California, and bread from Austin. So you know, the idea of doing, you go to parties or events and they're very indie focused, but then you go backstage or you go into the green room and it's all crap. You know, it's like, well, I can't name brands, right? Because they're probably sponsors, you know. But so like you kind of have to put your sort of money or hospitality where your mouth is. Like if you're going to have an indie event, then support, you know, serve up the indie stuff. So that's sort of the connective tissue that I'm trying to do more of. But so that was the Billy Reed. What's the other one? Oh, ATO. I feel like I'm talking way too much.
Nils, is that true?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, but just to riff off of what you just said, I think it goes way beyond events. I think it's really important that people, not everybody feels this way, but people that feel really strongly about what they listen to and the nature of independence in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
I think they really need to think about what they eat and drink. Also, it's incredible people that have really strong feelings about corporations and everything that they're consuming is.
Yeah, I mean it's like a political sort of move, I mean, like even like going into a bookstore and buying a book, I don't even feel like I'm supporting, this the publisher in the store. I feel like I'm actually supporting like this bigger sort of movement of like sort of just buying something that's really interesting but. Yeah.
There's a lot of strategies that we put in place to kind of to kind of address a lot of these kind of essentially marketing issues to try to get not just preach to the choir, bring as many people in. One, it's just education. I know it sounds kind of boring. We try to make it as sexy and delicious as possible, but really, when we think of marketing, it's really just about explaining what exactly chocolate is, because that's still. Even though we've been around for 7 years and there's people that are in our world are tired of seeing us, there's still the large majority of people haven't ever been exposed to Mass Brothers chocolate. So any chance we can to talk to people how chocolate is made and how the chocolate they may have been eating is made is really important to us. And then just to get them to taste our chocolate. So education is really important. And then the other thing is that we were told by a wise friend that you never want to be too far ahead of the parade where nobody knows you're in one, you're just waving at people. And I think that's really important. And I think that, so we don't also want to be too preachy, which is why we've really committed ourselves to really having a lot of fun, like honest fun with the various videos we've done, with packaging. So I think we make a conscientious effort to do that, just to reach as many people as possible.
You asked about the ATO thing?
Yeah. If you want to go back to that, I mean, it seemed like an interesting thing.
Yeah. So ATO Records, they had a new release by a band called Hooray for the Riff Raff, and the album just happened to be called Small Town Heroes. And so we did these events around the country on release day, and at in each market we included independent food and drink, like the heroes of the small batch food and drink community. So, instead of being like a release party with, shitty pizza and shitty cheap beer, we actually had, we had like, I think like 50 producers involved, so it was sort of fun.
So as far as more discovery tools, we were kind of talking about that a little bit. Nils, in your experience as a publicist, I mean, we talked about some of the, I guess, higher level food publications, the ones that were around in the 70s where that was all about fine dining and long French meals at night. And, it was kind of the aspiration to get to that point. I mean, that's what my parents did. They did those dinner parties that lasted for 3 hours, and I really loved it. And that got me in. But nowadays, it's all about blogs and about, those type of experiences. I mean, do you have... Are there similar pitches that happen now with food products in relation to music products?
I think so. I mean, yeah. I think in the food world, you are dealing with more kind of smaller boutique-y publications. You're dealing with blogs. You have Eater, things like that are so much more influential. So instead of getting, you guys get a mention in GQ is nice, but it's also nice to have an interview on Eater that gets passed around.
I remember vividly the first time this guy walked in. We had just opened up shop, and this guy knocked on our door and came in, and he's like, hey, I'm with this blog. Can I just do a video of what you guys are doing? We're like, yeah, sure, come on. It was just Mike and I in there, and we just kind of showed him what we were up to. And he posted it, and then he said, oh, by the way, I'm at this blog, we never heard of it at the time, eater.com. And then the next day we had like tons of people.
And you're like, what a dumb head.
All day long. And we're like, holy shit, what was this? What's Eater? What is this going on? Yeah.
So it's true. I think it's happening. It's really similar discovery tools in both. And something that's interesting is like I was talking to somebody who's really deep in the wine world, and they were saying a lot of the really interesting conversation about wine is happening on Twitter, which seems so incredible. It's something that's so rarefied as wine is really the important things happening in wine, or a lot of it is being talked about on Twitter. But it's a good illustration of how it's all kind of been democratized a little bit.
But in the same way there were like zines, like zine culture was really big in like indie music, and that's happening in food. There's really tiny sort of like Vanity Press or.
Although that was a big thing in the 70s as well. There was a huge independent zine-like food press in the 70s.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was less, talked about maybe in the same way, but.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the current ones? I mean, I know like Meat Paper and Mash Tun.
There's tons of them. There's cereal.
Is there a chocolate one?
No, there will be.
Oh.
We'll talk later.
One thing that's interesting I find in writing about food is that even more mainstream outlets are really open to, for lack of a better word, indie food ideas. So they want to hear about this, odd, tiny producer in a weird place. That's something that they see to have mainstream appeal. Kind of the same way, I guess, that the music press, started covering smaller bands when Nirvana or the band started getting popular. They realized that there might be an audience, even if they're not necessarily buying those records. There's an audience that wants to learn about them.
As you write about Mexico, are there similarities? I mean, are there things that you see when you go down there and travel that I mean, is it street food? Is that what we're talking about, or is it?
I guess the thing about Mexico is that it's because of the economic situation. Generally, the people that have the luxury to make chocolate or whatever are rich people. So there's not really a romanticizing of poverty. So this, the kind of Brooklyn, Portland, people just, living in a crappy apartment curing fish or whatever isn't really a romantic notion. People want to have a nice restaurant, and but at the same time, there's obviously a huge amount of awareness that a lot of what's happening in food is in that realm, and of course foraging and hyper localism and everything. So there's a lot of awareness on that. Mexico is interesting food-wise because it's really interesting stuff happening on the highest level and really interesting stuff happening on the lowest level. So you have both things are coexisting, the finest fine dining and the scrappiest street food, and both are equally amazing. But I think they're in the kind of the early stages of indie-fying it,
Are music bloggers more annoying than food bloggers, or?
It depends on what industry you're in, I guess.
Well, I mean, it is. You look at. I mean, I guess there's all sorts of different levels of blogs now. I mean, when music blogs first started, it was everybody out of their bedroom writing about music, and hey, can I get a copy of this from the labels? And you couldn't really tell who was who. I mean, now those have risen to the top, and you can kind of identify who's a respected music critic at this point. I mean, we have crowdsourced review sites such as Yelp and Urban Spoon, which, I don't know if I love them. I don't know if I hate them. I know that I use them sometimes. I mean, has it gotten to the point where the food criticism, we don't have that daily paper guy that was the only guy you read about the restaurants. He was the one that went and four-starred it or tore it to shreds, and now it's like spread across all sorts of channels.
Right. Well, one thing, there's no pitchfork of food. Mm-hmm. There's a handful of important, influential sites, but there's not that same thing where, somebody puts out a new nut butter and this site gives it a numerical rating and it rises or falls based on that. That doesn't, which is probably for the better.
It's kind of
that
like Robert Parker with wine, I guess.
It is, yeah, really. I mean, incredibly so. Although Parker's influence is so, even just in the last year, has changed a lot, which points to everything that we're talking about. But yeah, it doesn't really, it's not really there with food products, which is maybe for the benefit of food products that it doesn't exist.
So should we start it or not? On our list of things we need to do.
We talked a little bit about this before we came on stage, and that's that if you kind of stick to one thing for long enough, eventually it's going to work somehow. And I think that that's an approach that Michael and I take, that although we consider ourselves pretty marketing savvy, sort of naturally, we enjoy a lot of that, we know that we always have to put our product, the quality of the chocolate first. And the second that begins to waver and we start paying too much attention to any blog or your Yelp page or anything like that, that's just, you're already going down the wrong direction. So, which, you know, it seems like common sense and almost like a cliche to say, but it's really important. And I think that the people, the food producers that won't just be a one-hit wonder are going to be the ones that just stay focused on their craft and really take it seriously. We've had, I think that there's a lot of people out especially in the United States, that think that Mike and I are, you know, multimillionaires that are just killing it because of and how easy it must have been for us because we just have pretty packaging and some beards, and so we have so many imitators now all around the world now. I mean, they're popping up all of the time, and they would always imitate just one aspect of it. You know, It's like, we're going to copy your pattern paper here, or we're going to start a company and we're going to have beards, or we're going to have a lot of nautical themes. You know, and that's just not the point. You know?
The joke's really on them because we won't be millionaires for at least a couple more years.
What's interesting is that one thing that is happening in Mexico is artisanal chocolate.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some really, which it should, it's from Mexico, but there's some really serious and indie-minded chocolate happening there that's really incredible, a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really happening all around the world, actually.
Yeah.
With chocolate, when we first started officially, when we kind of quit our day jobs and took it, you know, that's what we woke up to do. I was in 2007, and there were probably a handful of kind of independent craft, quality-focused chocolate makers around the world, really. And now one of our farmers who's, you know, gets calls all the time, he estimates that in the United States alone, he gets calls from between 60 and 70 different chocolate makers. Most of them are making it out of their garage, but I mean, it's just a huge, huge thing and it's not just in the United States, it's all around Australia, Mexico. It's starting to pop up in Europe. I mean, yeah.
And that's something that actually could, you know, might relate to the music industry, where there are, you know, now 70 craft chocolate makers around, and with, you know, the internet and websites, it's actually kind of interesting because you don't really know who's just making, you know, one bag of beans a year and who's actually doing hundreds of tons a year, or just it's really, you know, the scale of large or small, or, you know, I don't know if that relates to music on just, you know, how much people are getting out there. Is there a certain deception involved, or is that a marketing strategy, or who knows what?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
These guys?
Yeah.
So in music, you know, you're a band and you release a record every, like, you know, year and a half, whatever the cycle is. Do you have sort of an ideal schedule of like, oh, we want to do a new bar every 6 months or something?
Yeah, every year we kind of treat it.
Okay.
We're pretty. We kind of rethink the line every year just to keep that discipline going. That even as we grow, we're always challenging ourselves to kind of reinvent ourselves every year to keep it fresh. You know, the motivating thing I try to say to people in the mornings is, let's just start a new. It's almost as if we're starting a new company this year. So we even change the packaging every year, which is definitely like a big no-no in like marketing 101, big business. But we change all of our packaging every year.
We like to make sure people don't recognize our product.
But it just keeps it fresh, you know what I mean? So we're kind of that indie rock snobs where we see people copying us, like, oh, look, they're copying our bars 3 years ago, man.
Well, we have plenty of stories of bands that never put their name on their actual album cover. So
you guys
understood.
Well,
Maybe next year. Yeah.
but you know, the real parallel with music there is, you know, you have somebody who's really the rare band that comes along that's really good quality, that also becomes popular and is very influential, and you have a lot of copycats. And some of those copycats end up being the best bands in the world, and some of them are crappy. So you really, it's kind of what
you guys have an advantage though, because, you know, if you're a band or artist and you put out a couple really shitty records in the beginning, or like things you're not proud of, they will always live on, you know. Like if you decide to like discontinue or like stop making something because it's a turd or you just don't, it didn't turn out right, then like once it's gone, it's gone.
Yep.
It's like nobody
Yep,
can
that
ever
is an
taste it
advantage,
again,
yeah.
right? Actually, do you, if we could taste your original chocolates, like when you first started getting, would you be proud of it? I mean,
That's definitely, I would be proud of it, and that's what got me personally into just knowing that we could form a business around it. That it was like tasting chocolate for the first time, just the purity of the ingredients, just using beans and cane sugar, which no other chocolate maker was really doing. There's all these added emulsifiers, vanilla, soy lecithin, and extra cocoa butters, and ours was really just beans and sugar, and it really opened up my eyes to what chocolate could be, and that we really did have a true opportunity to reintroduce the world to chocolate through those very first batches.
That being said, I don't know if we've been like chasing the first time every batch. We're always trying to make it better and better and better.
Yeah.
We've been archiving everything since the very beginning, because I think that even those first couple batches, we knew we were onto something pretty special, and we're like, what, let's just start archiving these things and bring them out. And I think we've even been talking about doing a Bon Appetit event, which we're doing next week at their offices, just to do a little demo, and we're going to bring a bunch of our old archives and do a little tasting to see how
that's
it's
so
changed.
cool. Yeah.
Dry aged.
Yeah.
Is there a chocolate museum somewhere in the
I
world?
imagine
Probably in
so,
Belgium
yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
Yeah, okay.
So you guys kind of hinted that chocolate is becoming a trend. I mean, are there other trends that you guys are seeing out there for small batch products? I mean, what's snowballing? What's catching on? What are some things? Tom, maybe you know the answer to this.
Yeah, we curate a page for Kickstarter, so I'm sort of always looking at the Kickstarter stuff, and yeah, there's some trends, like sort of dude food is sort of one of them. That's what I call like hot sauce and jerky, like dudes that want to like make something, but it has to be dude-ish. So there's a lot of like hot sauce, a lot of jerky. There's also a lot of bees, stuff around. People love bees, like maybe it's that country in the city thing where people can have bees, and you can make various things from, the honey, but a lot of people claiming to be the next cupcake, which is the most annoying thing in the world. A lot of people claiming that our product is gonna, finally, kill the cupcake craze, but I don't know. Yeah.
Well, no, I think
Tom hates cupcakes.
that is apparent.
I feel like anything that can be fermented, and I feel like there's always kind of a one-upmanship about what I'm going to ferment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I've been seeing. And some people do it amazing. Like we have a really great relationship, and I love the guys. I love Chad over at Tartine in San Francisco, and at Bar Tartine they can ferment anything and make it the most delicious thing I've ever seen. But that doesn't mean everybody should. And so that's, I think, that's what I would say is the trend that I see the most.
I mean, that's an important point. You kind of, the trends are fun, but you kind of figure out what is a trend and what's real. Chocolate is not a trend. Chocolate is the important historic, part of our lives. But, seaweed is a great thing to incorporate into food, which a lot of people are doing now, but it's not necessarily something that is going to balloon into a permanent thing on our shelves,
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So on that, I mean, are you guys discovering some cool things that are out there right now that you'd want to share with everybody to sort of follow up on, and maybe also easy channels that you can find things like this around the country, other than your website, of course.
Subscription services are really big.
Yep.
There's a lot of subscription services, where, for a certain fee they curate a box of goods that are themed, via either like geographically or like dinner party or whatever. So there's a lot of those popping up, and I think those are sort of discovery tools, or at least they purport to be discovery tools. Yeah.
Yeah, well, speaking of, that kind of ties back to distribution channels, that if you're an independent food producer, the best way with the highest margins is to sell a bunch of stuff online and to attract as much traffic. So if you can get a successful subscription series to your website, then you're just getting repeat customers that are just getting stuff shipped to their house automatically every month. So if you can do that successfully, there's a winery in Sonoma called Scribe, and they do it really well. I mean, that's really how they make their money, and they do it really well. And that way they can, instead of worrying about all the other distribution channels and distractions in business, they can actually just focus on the quality of their wines, and then throw parties and ship great wine out every month or so.
It's like single of the month, the Sub Pop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, Third Man Records does that, obviously. Pay a yearly fee and you get a track a month. Yeah.
I think the indie food community is pretty supportive of each other and pretty tight. I mean, I think the music community is too, but maybe food is even a little more. They're kind of fighting the good fight. It benefits them to support each other, and I find that a way that I've found a lot of really interesting makers and products is by people that I like on Twitter. You see who's following them and who they are following in turn.
Yeah.
And a lot of interesting people have popped up that way.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just speaking of like collaborations, that kind of goes along the community, the food community. I mean, for one, a musician, whether they like it or not, is also partly an entertainer because they're performing on stage all of the time. So there's probably a little bit of they don't want to share the stage so much as maybe a food guy who actually feels more comfortable behind the scenes nerding out about food.
Right.
So we've built great relationships with a lot of amazing food people all around the country because we're fellow nerds in food, and I love to hear Chad talk about bread at Tartine. I love to hear the Mariani brothers at Scribe Winery talk about wine. So
When you can have a lot of products on stage at once.
Yeah.
It's like if you go to a restaurant that really supports those people, and you're exposed to 20 products at one time. So it's something you don't necessarily get with a show.
Yeah.
Rick keeps using the word nerd, and I think that's really interesting because it is sort of a misfit culture, right? Like, it's always the misfits that worked at record stores and the weirdos, right? Yep. And if you go to like a farmer's market or artisan market, it's always like the weirdos, the really interesting, cool guys, people. Yeah, and it goes back to that community thing. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I hate to call it nerd, but my battery is dead.
There you go.
We call it nerd. I mean, I think that hipster is a term that's thrown around, and that's a dirty word, and I'm sure foodie is a dirty word at this point.
Yeah, for sure. We prefer the term foodler, which Derek Herbster over here coined. We're foodlers. We keep a foodler. You guys can all use that, by the way. That's
It sounds kind of naughty.
So as we kind of talked a little bit about collaboration, but I mean collaboration as far as using other people's products within your own products. I mean, beers do that a lot. They're using the local espresso bean, or they're using a hot chili pepper. Are you guys doing anything like that at this point?
Yeah, for sure. We do that we do that a lot because independent food producers you're doing a lot of small batches. So you can kind of, if you do one, it's not like you're committing the rest of your business to being in bed with this company, and if you're usually buddies with them. So we've done a chocolate porter with Six Point Brewery in Brooklyn, which was great.
That sounds good.
We've done, it was called Three Bean, which was a triple collaboration between our cocoa beans, Stumptown's coffee beans, and these Romano beans that Six Point sourced. Then we've also done a bourbon, a chocolate bourbon with Kings County Distillery. So they would take basically in the chocolate making process, you roast the beans and then you take the shells off. And then take the shells off, and then what you use is the cocoa nib, but the beans are discarded. But they can be used for all sorts of things, mulch, compost, all sorts of things. And we gave some to the Kings County Distillery, which is just in Brooklyn down the block. And Colin, the owner there, he was just messing around with it, and he basically just teabagged it, just steeped it, and it makes an amazing chocolate bourbon, really dark in color. It extracts a lot of the flavor that it has in it.
And does it have a chocolate flavor?
Yeah, absolutely. Big chocolate flavor. And there's no cocoa butter in the shells, so you're not worried about adding all this extra fat content. It works, yeah.
Actually, back to trends.
Yeah.
Barrel aging is huge. Everybody wants like bourbon barrels. Everybody is clamoring to find them and put things in them and ignore them for a while.
See, we're guilty of all these things. We age our chocolate. Our chocolate's aged, and we do experiments with all sorts of different aging practices. aging in oak, wrapping in dried herbs. We've got some experiments that have been aging for well over 2 years. So, time and temperature changes flavor, right? So who's to say what a 40-year-old aged single origin Chihuahua chocolate bar is going to taste like? So we might as well be the first to do it.
This is probably not a best point to kind of end on, but is there, my perception is that there's 1 million nanobreweries and microbreweries now. Is alcohol getting more funding from people? Is it easier to get money for alcohol products versus chocolate, let's say?
Probably right. I mean, we're just still a pretty young industry. You know what I mean? I mean, we've definitely, here and there we'll get approached by larger companies that want to buy us up, but we haven't taken any of those offers. But you're just seeing that a little bit now, and they're, I would imagine they're still relatively risky endeavors because, we're a profitable company, but we're quality focused. So until the world really starts embracing the whole, we're still a niche market. I mean, we're still a specialty market. So I don't know if Hershey's is going to try to swallow us up anytime soon.
But it's interesting that food is kind of in the place that music was maybe 20 years ago, where you have this success of these that maybe was previously thought an impossible level of success by these very small companies, and then the bigger companies wanting to come in and investors, bigger companies trying to swallow them up. And it'll be interesting to see how the indie food world deals with that and what those parallels end up being with music.
Yeah, I mean, like Sharpenberger, they were bought by Hershey's. I think Hudson Whiskey in upstate New York, they were bought by Balvenie, I think. So, I mean, there's examples of different. I mean, I think the distilling industry is actually, from what I understand, we did a bourbon seminar recently where we paired chocolate with bourbon, but learned a lot about bourbon. And I know in that industry, there's really, it's sort of like chocolate. There's really just 3 or 4 big guys that do most of it, and a lot of it's private labeling. I know that's true with vodka for sure.
Yeah.
With chocolate, I mean, really, the large majority of chocolate consumed around the world is made by 3 huge companies. So.
And that's something, with music, you generally know who's indie and who's not, and it's easy to find out. With food, it's not so easy to find out. And I think, a little bit of research goes a really long way to find out really who's making these indie products that you're eating and how they're making them.
There's a lot of big guys sort of masquerading as little guys by really clever packaging.
Yeah.
So full disclosure, we're actually owned by Nestle's and Capitol Records, so you guys should all know that.
Well, I mean, it seems like, at least on the independent music side, I mean, there were studies recently that came out that independent music now has the largest market share that it's ever had, which is exciting news for independent artists. And, it seems like the groundswell is for independent food is growing as well. So it doesn't need to be co-opted necessarily. It's just,
Well, except it means that it's all the more reason that it will be co-opted.
Yeah. Well, I think, are we ready for questions from the audience? Yeah? There's a microphone being passed around if anybody wants to shoot questions to the panelists. That
Can
would
we
be cool.
also pass the chocolate around?
Oh,
yeah.
Hey, hi. Hey, I just want to let you guys know that after Q&A, come over and taste some chocolate. We have some to taste. Cool.
Do it now.
Yeah, we can just pass it
Pass
around.
it around,
Just
yeah.
pass it around. Yeah, why not?
Give the people what they want.
We'll bring the chocolate to you.
Because
here's a question over here.
Josh, would you be willing to talk about the physical intersection of indie rock and indie music and indie food, particularly with respect to the venue that you have and kind of your path to doing that?
Well, I mean,
You're a plant.
No, it wasn't planned. Well, the music venue, Motorco Music Hall, is a venue in which I'm a partner in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina, which is its own mecca for food at this point. But I mean, it was something that when we originally opened the venue, we realized that, being dark was going to happen quite a bit. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't dark 7 days a week. I mean, we're battling in our own market with a promoter that's been around for 30 plus years. So he's getting all the phone calls from the agents. So we just wanted to make sure that we could expand the venue into multiple revenue streams, I guess. A bar, a big showroom that holds 500 people, and of course, kind of a stationary food truck. So it's worked out really well. It just the food component just started around 6 months ago, and we're finding that, the more people we have coming through, it's been very helpful for shows. I mean, if they're on site and they're seeing what shows are coming up, it's a much more organic way to let them know about these shows versus Facebook event alerts. And it's been great. I mean, it's, some of my favorite venues, the 930 Club in DC has food, Shuba's in Chicago. So it just seems kind of a natural progression now when there's fewer bands touring, they're not touring as much, there's more venues. You just have to really differentiate yourself. Am I supposed to point it out? Do I have that power? How about right here?
Hi, my name is Milena. I come from a very small country in Europe, Croatia. I just wanted to say thank you to my brothers for making that wonderful chocolate.
You're welcome.
I discovered you in a small cheese shop on Bedford Avenue in Brooklyn, and then I discovered your factory, and my
They're
budget
one of our
is
first 5 accounts, actually. Yep.
Really? Yeah. Well, it's a great shop, and I love cheese so much. So this was my first why I came there. But then I found out about your chocolate and about your factory, and now I visit your factory each and every time I come to Brooklyn, which is like 3 or 4 times per year. And I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that I really admire what you do, and you're making a fantastic chocolate. I really do like chocolate, dark chocolate especially. So kudos to you. And I also have a couple of friends who are also your fans because they bring a lot of chocolate from your factory each time when I go there. So as much as my baggage limit allows me. So basically, thank you for that. And I hope to see you soon in Brooklyn.
Do you have the cookbook?
Awesome.
No, but I will buy. And
These guys actually have a book signing
tomorrow,
here at the
I
convention
know.
center.
Okay.
So if you're interested in that.
Yeah, I am, and I will come to the book signing. But so thank you so much. And
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
yeah.
Next question. Oh, there's somebody right behind.
In terms of measuring your success, so this question is mostly for the Mass Brothers. I think like when you're in music, whether you're an independent artist or an independent label or a major label artist or a major label, there's a lot of metrics to look at, and metrics is like a terrible word, but you look at SoundScan, you look at media base, you look at how many tickets you sold, you can look at things regionally, and I think like historically, Nils can speak to this more, but there's like, you've had like a Billboard Top 200, and it's always been like this larger scale, but now it's really breaking down more and more and more into, like tiny measurements so you can actually like really gauge how you're developing. So there's a new artist chart. You can look at how things are developing market by market. You can be the #1 artist in a market on Shazam and, not have, anything else in any other market. So it's challenging, I think, to kind of gauge like how you're progressing and how you measure success. And so in independent food, how do you do that? How do you look at the way that you're growing? How do you look at, the sense of community that Nils was talking about? I think is really important, but also at the same time in music, independent music is also very important, but at the same time, like if Matador has a chance at getting an artist on Kimmel, and Sub Pop has an artist who has a chance on getting on Kimmel, you use those metrics in order to get that opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's supportive, but it's also competitive, and I'm just curious to know in independent food, how do you make those connections? How do you create that community? But also, how do you compare yourselves to other, competitors And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so definitely we have to just trust our palate first, because we're doing a food, just like you have to trust your sound if you're a band. First and foremost, we have to just feel good about what we're putting out there. But there definitely are some benchmarks. There's not that structure in place with food so much. But for instance, when we got our first call from Thomas Keller he wanted to feature our chocolate on his menu at both Per Se and French Laundry. That was definitely a time where we're like, okay, we're
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah. So that was it. That's like better than being on Kimmel. You know what I mean? There's things like that.
And really not just being on the menu once, but maintaining that relationship. And that's something that we can measure, where we are not, building these relationships and maintaining them and having them grow and mature and see what else we can do together.
And you could argue that something like Keller, that it's less important how much he brings in than just having that relationship. Yep. And that's kind of the case with music, where you might have something that doesn't result in a lot of album sales, but it does a lot for the band's profile.
Yep. Another fun, just because we're on the theme of indie music here, another fun benchmark for us was that the guys from Phoenix asked us to go to one of their shows, and we're like, really? That's pretty sweet. That's a pretty.
They love our chocolate. They're crazy about it.
Yeah. So we had these amazing seats with like their family and friends, and we're like, okay, this is insane. We've never met these guys before. And then they invited us backstage, and there's like 150 people there. It was at the Barclays Center. They just played for like 15,000 people. And we went downstairs to the little fun room, and there's like hundreds of people down there that were also invited. And we're like, okay, so it's not that crazy. They march in, and they go, Mass Brothers! And they just wanted to come over and get their picture taken with us.
So those are the benchmarks we look for.
Yeah. And then they said that wherever they go, they request Mass Brothers to be like, to be...
It's on their rider?
Yeah.
The rider.
And the best...
So
nice.
we're like, this is amazing. That was a benchmark moment.
And the best part is then they bought us a drink, and the bartender charged them, which I got a little offended about.
Do we have time for one more question?
I can't see that far.
One more. This is the last question. Sorry.
Or too quick.
What happens when you go to number one in the UK or in Croatia? And I know that you've got your second facility in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. What happens when you have a massive following in another country and it's maybe time to build a factory? Yeah. Do you spend half your life in the air going to see it, or do you entrust it to someone else?
That's exactly what we're dealing with right now. So just really quickly, because I know we're running out of time, but the decentralization of production is going to be really important to maintain the growth of quality craft chocolate makers. So one thing we've already done is inspired others to build factories. So we're really proud, actually, and not threatened by the 70 craft chocolate makers that are popping up around the country and are going to be popping up in UK or in Paris. There's
That being said, it's also pretty nice that there's two of us.
Yep. Yeah. So because there's two of us, we already have plans in the works right now of opening a Mass Brothers factory in London. So that's something that we're actively going to pursue. Yeah.
All right, well, I think we're out of time. I just want to thank all these guys up here on the panel. They did an excellent job. And thanks for all of you guys for coming. Have a good rest of your time in Austin. Thank you.